You're very welcome this afternoon. We have a long, serious session of communications for you. The program is the first session before the tea break, will be about communications principles and activities in general. The second half of the afternoon after the tea break will be about crisis management and crisis communications. Now, in this first hour and a half, we're going to be doing with you what might in other circumstances take 2 weeks or 3-week course, okay? So we are going to ask the most intense concentration from you, and particularly to think minute by minute, what is the meaning of this for me and my work and my country? Constantly thinking, how does this apply to the work I do? So, Paula and I will do our double act, which we've been developing over the last year, a special South American comedy act here, and
I'm not funny.
particularly serious, long-faced British act here. So it's a nice complementarity.
He pretends not to laugh at my jokes all the time, so that's part of the drill.
Her jokes are wonderful. You'll find out.
One thing we want to share with you is that the content of the materials is really heavy, but that's not because we are going to go in detail through all the information there. So do not make any effort to read everything on the text, because they will be shared with you. So you will be able to read them. We are just having them because we want you to have them and be able to reflect on them when you are back in your rooms tonight, and then you can ask us questions over the next 2 weeks.
Very good. Thank you. So the first question I want to just make clear in your heads, I think you're clear about this already, but I want to ask you, why is communications important in pharmacovigilance, and why should you be serious students of communication? What is the big question, big answer?
Why is communications important?
Of what?
Of the importance of pharmacovigilance.
Why?
Because it's important for safety measures. Like
because it's important for safety measures? Yes, okay. Anyone else like to just refine that? That's pretty good.
As well as public health.
What about public health?
For awareness for the public to be using in the drugs or medication in the proper way.
Okay, so we have a very clear vision. Okay, we have a contribution from Sweden here.
I just wanted to say, because we need everyone's best and exact effort to get it right.
Say that again, please.
We need everyone's best effort.
Yes.
And exactness, sort of. We need to get everyone to understand exactly what to do to get it right.
All right, yes, we need to get everyone to understand about the safety of drugs and about pharmacovigilance itself. But we're not here just to spread news about pharmacovigilance, are we? We're thinking about very specific long-term goal of improving patient safety and influencing public health practice and what people do with their doctors and what doctors do. So that's the vision we have to have. Not just spreading news about pharmacovigilance, but practical behavior change amongst the community of healthcare professionals and patients.
One of the things we're going to be talking today a lot is about the impact of our communications. So there is going to be a lot of emphasis on how we craft our communications, how do we place information, how do we create a message, how do we select a message, but there is also going to be a lot of emphasis about what's the impact of our communications, because without it, our communications are not effective. So
we've established the big vision. The long-term vision is to influence behavior and understanding in the community as far as possible towards patient safety and better practice. But all these things as well. I won't go through this whole list. But effective communications will be behind effective fundraising. It will be behind effective influence of policymakers to change legislation or regulations or to get pharmacovigilance established and so on. All these kind of things. And each of these, promoting, educating, and all those individual items require specific kinds of skills. And it's not just one kind of blanket, be good at communications. You have to be good at negotiations, good at persuading, good at motivating, good at influencing, and so on, all these things which we will talk about.
And during these hours that we have together, the idea is that you are not expected to go back home and become excellent communicators in a 3-hour course. Okay, it took us a bit longer to achieve our skills. All we want is to go back home with these thoughts in mind, so you can encourage your teams to spend more resources and more time thinking their communications.
The simple truth is that the science of pharmacovigilance is a waste of time unless there is first-class communications associated with it and its results and activities and its purposes. So that unless communications is integrated into your work and that you have people who are skilled at doing it, the science itself can never fulfill its potential.
And that is our key message. So that's what you have to remember.
So, another question for you. In terms of communication, what is an effective communication? Can you tell me the characteristics of an effective communication? Any number.
Speaking the language that your audience understands.
Speaking the language that your audience understands. Very good. What else?
I can say the process of communication, which is receiving message, processing that, understand, and then feedback.
Very good. Oh, this man can run the course for us next time. Did you want to say something to?
Yeah. Using simple language or words, so that the sender and the receiver will have the same understanding.
Very good. Using the right language so that the sender and the receiver have the same understanding.
Teresa, come here and I'll come here.
All right, let's.
It's a repetition.
Okay.
I would just say just unambiguous.
Unambiguous. Okay. Let's leave it there for now.
Okay.
We have to be very strict about the amount of time we let you talk. We want to hear you, as you know. But if we're going to get through everything, we'll have to limit our discussion to some extent. Here is a reasonably comprehensive statement of what an effective communication is. And there are some very important features in that, most of which you mentioned. The sending of a message, yes, of course, with evidence that it has been received and understood, has prompted some change or action, and has generated feedback about the process. If we look at it diagrammatically, this is the kind of picture you need to keep in your mind when you're assessing your own communications and those of anyone else. Do they fulfill this circular process? And that's how it looks. And that puts in diagrammatic form the things that you said. And the critical thing about this is that an effective communication is a completed circle. Very often we communicate, we send stuff out and we hope it arrives, hope it has some message. We send an email. We don't know if it's gone into junk, if it arrived, if the person's on holiday, if they took any notice of it, if they understood it, if they did anything. And unless you have feedback and you ask for feedback and set up feedback mechanisms, communication can't work.
Mm-hmm. And this diagram can be broken at any part of it. So sometimes you have a very clear message, or sometimes the problem starts with the message itself. Then choosing the channel, making sure it has been received, understood, that it prompts action, change. When we talk about pharmacovigilance, we talk about behavior change in public health practices. So that's really important, to hear how things go and then to rework your message if necessary. So this is a diagram that we have. If we want to do effective communications, we have to be aware of the whole process at all times.
And that the circle is closed. And that at the feedback process, you may get feedback which suggests how you have to change your communications in the future. So this is a continuing circular process of learning and development. This is a quotation from a very famous British author, George Bernard Shaw. The illusion of communication having taken place. When people think what I've done is a communication, but it isn't, for all sorts of the kind of reasons we've suggested already. And for authorities and official organizations and scientists, this is one of the great weaknesses, is there is a belief that when you've sent something out, a transmission, that the communication has been completed.
The typical examples are if you decide that you have something very important to communicate to your communities and your boss says, oh, let's do a brochure, or let's hold a press conference. And that's not always the best way of communicating. So that's when we have to take a step back and go back to the diagram and think, what's the message, what's the audience, how do we do that? But without a planning process, those communications are not effective.
And this is the habit of big organizations and bureaucracies. Big building on the left, they all sit there in their offices with things they want to tell the public, send out messages, brochures, press releases, all the rest of it, and they're just kind of sent out without any sense of the circularity, or without feedback mechanisms, without pre-research of the audience and so on. I want to make another rather important point to you, which I don't know if you've thought about this. In some respects, we are in the post-printed word age. Generally speaking, the great bulk of the population of the world do not have the printed word as their primary source. I'm sorry, there's somebody doing some mobile phoning over there. But she's feeding back to me that she's not interested in what I'm saying, that she has something else to do, so I have to take some action to move that forward, don't I? So that's a tiny little example of watching your audience all the time. What is happening in their brains? What are they doing? Where are they? Are they engaged? And if they're not engaged, it's my fault too. That's the other thing. Lack of attention is not just the problem of those who are not attending. It's the problem of the people who are asking them to attend and failing to impress them with the importance or the urgency or the usefulness of what they're doing. So people who send out things and say, well, they didn't take any notice, it's not the population's fault,
no.
It's the person who sends the message.
Exactly.
So, I'm talking about our living in a post-printed word world. The enormous bulk of the world's population do not have the printed word as their primary source of knowledge, information, understanding, anything at all. The printed word is to some extent old-fashioned. It is still necessary and people do still use it, but if you think about the primary ways all of us get information about the world, it is through visual images, videos, television, website, social media. It is not the printed word, which has so often been the default communication for scientists.
Yes, that's true. And also that the amount of information we have access every day is overwhelming. There is a lot of competition. We live in an era where there is so much out there that as communicators, it's really difficult to compete with the amount of information. So if you're trying to communicate a PV fact that is already complicated, you have to be creative and innovative to really cause an impact. Otherwise, your message will get lost in a sea of words and images.
And the problem also is that when scientists and communicators and officials and bureaucrats use words, they use far too many words. And that's another problem, that documents are long and difficult and complicated and full of words. So, let's just think about some of the principal qualities of good communication that we've hinted at during this introductory session. And you've mentioned some of these, and in order that you don't have to listen to my voice all the time, can we get somebody else? Would you read this for us? Read the slide for us.
Good communication, clear and simple to understand, provokes a reaction or change, accessible and timely, provides benefits, cements relationships, catches the whole's attention, attractive, stands out from the crowd, relevant and interesting to us.
Okay. Obvious stuff, isn't it? But it's not always true of communications, and we'll come back to all these issues shortly. So if we're living in a post-pre-printed world, a world after, what should we be doing? We should be thinking about other ways of communicating and using particularly visual images and ideally moving images and music and all kinds of other ways, wherever it is possible, finding ways that are going to impress people. And we've just got a couple of examples, 2 or 3 examples here to show you the sort of thing that people are doing in terms of very important public health messages.
Can we ask you just a few seconds? I mean, what do you understand by this message? Will it work in your community? Have you seen similar things? This is a campaign in the UK for a very specific segment of the population. I don't know if you can all read it, but it says 20% of females between the age of 15 and 19 say alcohol is the main reason they first had sex. And it's a campaign against genital herpes, to raise awareness of genital herpes. Can you compare this to any campaign you have seen in your home countries, or any campaign you would like to discuss with us? How do you communicate safety or health issues at home?
What do you see there? What are the people who put this communication together been thinking when they did this? What is behind a communication like this?
They have noticed that the genital herpes is much, alerted at the female girls aging from 15 to 19. So they have raised this issue of saying that they should not use alcohol at this age.
Okay.
I think this is...
That's the message, but why have they chosen this way of doing it? You've given us a verbal message, haven't you?
Yeah,
that is the verbal message. She's right. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But what is...
I think Paulina has a comment.
Very good.
Thank you. Because I believe they want to catch their attention. They want to catch the attention of female between 15 and 19 who drink alcohol. So it's a very smart way to catch their attention with this vodka. Absolute.
What's the bottle? Yes, I mean,
which is very popular, and it catches your attention.
Yes.
Definitely.
It's an iconic advertising image, isn't it? Which will be familiar to everybody.
So they have a very clear target.
Yes, a very clear target, an audience segment.
So in this example, we have seen how the whole circle of communication has been thoughtfully processed. Of course, we don't know about the feedback or the impact, but we know that the campaign was very successful. And it has been done in a way that it communicates a story, tells a message through graphics and very few words.
And this is something we need to think about all the time. Our default position is words, isn't it? So let's have a new default position, which is, what is the best way of doing this? That's the question. This is another example. We're not going to discuss this in detail, but this is a street graffiti communication in the midst of a community. And you can see, and a completely different approach, but again, you can see how vivid and dramatic that kind of communication is. Far better than any number of leaflets or posters which are full of words. So, I'm going to be very disparaging about words. Here's another example. This is again just showing, not telling. 1 in 4 people are affected by mental health problems. So, I mean, again, vivid dramatization of it. Now, another important aspect of communications I want to talk to you about is benefits. And you can see here that many commercial operations provide benefits for their customers. They say, buy our products and we'll give you 2. Buy our products and we'll give you a ticket for the lottery. Or buy our products and you get something else. You get a benefit, an extra benefit. Not just the benefit of the product, but something else. Why could I possibly think that benefits is an important aspect of communication?
But benefits in which sense?
At
benefits,
all, ever, for all communication.
Because you keep informed more the issues that can be related with you or your family.
Push that a little bit further. Why, as a communicator, do I need to think about benefits when I'm framing my message?
Benefits. But
can we listen to? I think she's been trying to talk for a while. Yeah.
There is, for example, in what I teach, social influence, there are these theories that talk about the fact that all communication has to rely on the need of the audience, and benefits are the, the answer to your needs. People have several needs, and always you have to show the benefits, so what covers that need. And there are different types of needs, and effective communication has to address, in a way, a need. Even if you invent that need, you still to address the need.
That's a very good point, because not all needs are real. Lots of needs are created, particularly commercial needs. But in the case of PV, we have a real need. So, yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to say also that put a focus on benefits when I'm trying to communicate with people will motivate them.
Good.
Exactly. Very good.
Okay. That is the point we need to remember.
Is what is in it for me? Why should I do this? Why should I follow this message? Why should I listen? Why should I listen to you? What is in it for me?
So when we're putting together a message of any kind to anybody, we have to think, how can we convey to them the benefit of paying attention to this message for their advantage? And we may think of one example, which we'll be talking about. We will not, but there will be a session on this. How do you get doctors to report ADRs? If you want to stimulate doctors to report ADRs, you have to find benefits in the activity for them. And if you don't, they won't do it. And it's the same with all communication. If there is no benefit, no perceived benefit, we are not going to take any notice of it. And a benefit may be something quite subtle. It may be like making you feel good about what you are doing. It may make you feel that you are behaving as a good professional, for example. It may feel that make you feel that you will get approval and recognition for doing this. So benefits are not by any means material things. They can be very subtle psychological things. But as she pointed out, they have to be benefits which are perfectly reflect the needs of the other people, not just some kind of general benefit that you have at your desk, you think about, but a genuine one that you know
when
is
we
part
work
of the...
When we work with behavior change communications, which is effective communications, we have to be very, very clear about what that benefit is. But even more, we have to be very clear how relevant that benefit is for the audience. It's not what we think is a benefit for them, but what they think and they know is a benefit for them. Okay, so we cannot stand from the place like I know all and I know what you need. No, only you know what you need.
Yes.
So I need to try to find out what resonates, what connects to within you and me, so I can communicate my message and it can be effective.
Here's an example of two different approaches to the same problem. One is the kind of authoritarian, paternalistic, controlling kind of communication. Don't do this. And the other one is the facilitating beneficial communication, which is do this and you'll feel better. And this is just a single, simple example. But again, we need to think about this very strongly. You know that most of the communications of drug safety, of course, are negative prohibitions. So maybe we have to try and think of ways of encouraging people to take drug safety seriously by offering them a much clearer vision of the benefits of it, which will then imply and teach them about the things they shouldn't do, but through the opportunities there are through the intelligent use of drugs.
And there is tons of research that really prove that positive messages work much better than negative messages. Excuse me. Because positive messages stay with you, really change a behavior, while negative messages scare you, and you might change a behavior for a short period of time, and then you forget about it.
Okay, there's just some introductory thoughts about a number of very important issues. The next section we're going to do is much more technical and in a sense theoretical, but I hope you'll see the benefits of this, and I want to test your brains and your intelligence by asking you to comment on what looks like a very complicated piece of work. We're going to look at what I think are the essential aspects of all communications from an analytical and theoretical point of view, just for a few minutes, because we need that as the starting point for our understanding of everything else. Here, I'm going to show you a diagram of two faces in a process of communication. And it could be two individuals, it could be one individual and a crowd, it could be any combination, and it could be any kind of communication. But look at this for a moment, and I'm then going to ask you to explain to us some of the elements, the details in this picture. That's enough. Let's go.
Okay, let's try to hear from you.
Choose any aspect of that diagram that you'll comment on and explain for us. Anything you like.
My understanding of this diagram is communication is both sides. It's it's not just one person's role, it's a two-person role.
Okay.
So you might be a communicator, and then you might be a sender, and the other person will be a receiver. And at the same time, when the feedback comes, the other will be sender and other will be receiver.
That's the fundamental thing. Communication is an active interaction between two sets of minds or brains or whatever it may be. What about other individual aspects on there?
What attracts my attention is the interference between the message and the noise. I mean, the messages and unwanted.
What do you understand by the word noise?
During the process of sending and receiving, there may be a problem.
What? Like what? Can you give us some examples?
Misunderstanding, for example.
Okay, that's something slightly different, but it's very, very close related. What were you saying? A barrier of some sort? What are the specific kinds of noise or barriers or interference? Distraction. Okay, from what?
From the channel, the meter.
What were you thinking?
Exterior.
Sorry?
External. Exterior.
External.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe from external environment.
From the external environment, absolutely, yes.
Then second thing.
No, go on.
Well, you could have mixed messages and not getting clear the actual message.
Yes, that's about the quality of the message itself. But the noise question is very important. Distractions of any sort. Yes, over here.
There can be, especially in health-related communication, there can be competing messages. So you send a message, but there are other messages out there that can compete with your message, I mean contradict it even, or become clearer, or have the appearance of giving more information than your message. And this can be the noise, in my opinion.
Let's ask you about coding, encoding and decoding. What do you think that's about?
Encoding and decoding?
In this particular picture,
coding and decoding. Encoding and decoding. Can we do that just now?
It's a oral communication taking place both the side. No one is the active listener. So that is ultimately, entered into a sort of noise.
Yes, it's okay. It's an inefficiency in the communication, but it's not quite the same.
One has to be active listener. Other one has to, right now both the channels are open.
Active.
Okay, just let's do this in order, because I think all of you want to say so much. So please raise your hands, and between Anna and I, we'll walk to you, and then you can all contribute. And we'll give maybe 4 more opportunities, I think, because we do have to tell you so much.
But I do want to concentrate on encoding and decoding.
Encoding and decoding.
What is that about?
Okay, just a minute, Dr. Hassan. We'll go here first.
Okay,
just a minute. Okay, go ahead. Go.
Encoding is the aspect in which the message is built by the sender. Decoding is the aspect by which the message is understood by the receiver.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent.
What's the process? I mean, let's push it a little bit further. Why is it called coding or encoding or decoding? You have some thought?
No, it's the same of Dr. Hassan. So when the message is sending, the process is in encoding, receiving of that correctly, and then understanding, and then response back to that. Okay. And it's
yes. I mean, that's about right. That's too high a level. I want something more gritty. Here we have our.
Do you want to say something? Is the same?
No, I should.
All right. Yes.
Okay. No.
Maybe encoding means using own experience, words, formulations. You are trying to communicate something based on several. I mean, experience, what language you use, what kind of terms you use, and this decoding is already experience of the person which is in front. Of course, he understood the message based on own experience and language, and how far he is involved in the message or subject discussed.
Very good. Okay. Let's just stay on this for a moment or two. I'm going to move forward to one slide to explain this. When you have an idea in your head, it has to move from idea to some form of expression, which is usually language. It could be, if you're a painter, it would be pictures, of course. But thinking or images in your head have to move from the process of abstract notions in your head to some specific form of expression. And usually for us, the encoding process is ideas are encoded in language. And the example I just want to give you to make it clear is the example of tree. And this may seem very, very stupid and obvious, but if you think about a tree and you want to communicate something about a tree, you have to use the code tree. And in every language, the code for the word for tree is different. And the words bear no relationship whatsoever to the physical object. They're just arbitrary codes which each of us uses in our own particular way. And of course, you have to understand a code like this, you need to be using the same code as the person who's listening to you. But that's not the end of the story, because even although we are all, at the moment, using English, for example, if you have, those are just other examples, if I say the word tree, all of us will have different ideas, even of what sort of tree we're talking about. So as you decode the word tree, you are drawing, as you were saying, you're drawing on your experience and your culture and making that picture whatever it is. So coding and decoding is the critical fundamental thing we're doing all the time. And if we want to encode a message, we first of all have to be able to do that accurately for ourselves. But then, going back to something that you were saying earlier, it has to be in a code which the recipient can precisely and exactly understand. And that's very often what goes wrong, of course. And even between people speaking the same language. It's nothing to do with foreign languages. But within our own languages, we have people whose decoding of our messages will be different from our intentions.
Exactly. And as Bruce explained, everybody has their own tree in their head. And tree is a very basic concept, right? We all have trees in our home countries, even in the desert. There are trees. What about health? Our own code, how we understand well-being, varies enormously between all of us here, and it varies even more between your communities and your countries and the people you try to talk to. So really understanding what is well-being, health, safety, risk, all that has to be thoroughly thought when you start encoding your message, because it gets more complicated when we are not talking about trees, right? We're talking about health.
And tomorrow you've got a session on risk from a very distinguished outsider. I'll just make one parenthetical example that we commonly, regulators commonly use words for risk of adverse reactions: common, uncommon, rare. Yes? And that, first of all, the idea of risk, our coding of risk is not the same as the general population's coding of risk.
Exactly.
If we say risk, we're thinking about, well, the chances of something bad happening, and it's a kind of neutral scientific concept. For most people, the idea of risk is frightening. Okay? It's a completely different decoding of the same word. And when we say uncommon or rare, 1 in 10,000, is it rare? And we think, well, that's no consequence, just go ahead, it's a safe medicine. No, we use safe in a different way from the population. Mm-hmm. Yes? This is a safe medicine. There is no safe medicine, you know that. There is no medicine that is 100% safe for everybody in all circumstances. And if we use the word safe, knowing that reservation, and then we use the word safe with the population, and then somebody dies from a drug, they're going to say, don't trust you, you said it was safe, and it isn't. Mm. So that's a critical piece of coding, decoding problem that we have to think about all the time.
And that summarizes why it's so important to work with communications in pharmacovigilance. As Bruce said at the beginning of this session, without communications, pharmacovigilance is useless. It doesn't work, okay? You're not going to get more reports, you're not going to be able to analyze the reports, population is not going to be able to know what to do and how to monitor their side effects. So that's what we have as on.
I want to go back to this very quickly and just summarize some of the stuff that you've talked about. Coding and encoding, I think from the nodding of your heads, you've got the hang of that, haven't you? Mm-hmm. You are nodding very well, and I want... See, this is feedback, and non-verbal feedback too, which we shall come to later. Tell me what, I mean, you look pleased with yourself for having got the hang of it. Why do you feel like that about this?
About what I feel?
About this, you having got the idea of coding and encoding, yes.
Well, my idea, well, of course, I'm agree with you about this thing, but also for this image, for example, I think one of the things I was really impressed on looking at it, or for me it's quite important, is look at the eyes. Yes. So really they are on the same line, and it's a way that you always have this kind of communication to see if you are interacting with the people. So in my case, I mean, this is quite visual as well, something was taking my attention or grabbing my attention.
Good.
The image.
Good.
Very good point. But no. But eye contact is culturally specific.
Exactly.
Okay? So that's just another thing you need to remember. In some cultures, if you look people in the eye, they'll be deeply offended. And so on. So, I mean, so that's just a little point about that.
Yes, exactly.
So, I don't want to say much more about anything, but we have...
I think we should talk a little bit about noise.
Yes, I want to do that. Absolutely. Noise you've talked about, you mentioned, but noise is probably as important as all the other things. Noise, external environment. Yes, so there's... there's a building site outside, and your brain is not concentrating fully on what you're doing. But there's also the internal stuff. You've got a dental appointment this afternoon, your kid's not well, you have to get home, you have to get the kids from kindergarten. Your brain is full of this internal stuff. You have alerts on your computer which are showing you that you've got emails coming in. You have an agenda of to-do things which you're thinking about. The lights are not working properly. If you're in a car, the lights won't be working at all. Will they now? For days on end, hours on end. No electricity, for example, So all these things have a serious potential, a serious risk of confusing your thinking and your message and your encoding and your purpose and your work. And the external noise of all kinds, also very distracting.
Yes, and if I just may add, besides all that, noise is also caused by beliefs, internal belief, values, different traditions, different conceptions of what is good and what is bad. In polio campaigns in Afghanistan and in Pakistan, when I was working with the Red Cross, we had to work a lot with the communities to really break that noise and really help them churn off that noise so they will understand the messages we were trying to communicate, because there was fear around it. Measles campaigns in Nepal will have the same effect. There is a lot of misunderstanding, lack of knowledge, and that can also be noise.
It's like trying to communicate in the middle of a fireworks display. If there is stuff of dramatic, colorful, important, competing stuff going on in the environment, you won't formulate good communications and nobody will hear you. And a lot of the time, it's something almost as dramatic as a fireworks display, because the distractions are so great for you and for your recipient. So we always have to think about how do we manage this situation where we have a critical message to give people in the middle of a fireworks display, yes? And probably you have to wait until it's finished. I mean, that's the answer. But don't just carry on without taking notice of the noise. But don't carry on without taking notice of the noise in your head.
As well.
If you are angry or depressed or upset, or you've just had a bad meeting with your manager, and you then go and write emails or letters or try and draft documents and so on, they won't do the job, because your internal noise will spill over into what you're doing. So, we go back to trees, finish that, we've done that. This is just a reminder of all these things. We haven't talked about everything in great detail, but all of these matter. The one we haven't talked about much is channel. We'll come a little bit more to that. You know, what method do you choose for the communication? These are just these are graphics done by Magnus Ekelo, who's a member of the UMC team, and I love these so much. They repeat things that we've seen already, but just to remind us about the he's having a very intense, intimate conversation with his cat, as you can see, which I thought was also lovely. Lots of blue blobs, which are noise between people, okay? And that may be the quality of your internet connection or the phone line. It can be something as simple as that, which stops you really focusing and concentrating.
Or language.
Or language,
or speaking a different language. When we are both using today, most of us are using a second language to communicate, and that can also create noise. Mental tiredness.
Yes.
I'm not sure how you use a word. English Hindi is quite special by ear, no? So, as well. So.
And the internal noise, the whole notion of what's going on in our own heads, how really focused are we on the external world, the end point, the purpose. So, and this is to indicate the complexities of remote communications when you're not even close to the person. But what we've said applies to remote communications, not just to communications face to face. And here you can see all the stuff that's going on. And if you're a Facebook fan and you are constantly getting Facebook notifications and looking at those in the middle of your conceptualizing an important public health message, you probably won't do it very well. You know, that's true for all of us. So easily distracted. And this noise, both within the system and the environment and within our heads, we need to have a method for making sure that we have a kind of pure, clear, thoughtful and sensitive environment in which we can communicate. The last influences we need to just again refer to, and Paula has already mentioned that, is the things that determine who we are. That this encoding business is not just about having the right language and sharing the right level of language, but of course it's about your immediate psychology determined by your own culture. And Anna made a point yesterday about Swedes are punctual, and Africans, on the whole, are not, and Thai people are not, where I live in Thailand. So, and those are things which influence how you see the world, those individual personal priorities which are influenced by your culture and your own psychology. How well do you get on with authoritative males, for example? You know, some people hate them and really can't bear them, and you know, they'll be influenced in their communications with them and in the things they do for them by that personal prejudice. Some people can't, I mean, a dominant, well, I shouldn't be sexist, dominant, overwhelming women are a real problem,
exactly.
Of course.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Then the next level is the socio-cultural thing, the much slightly higher level of the extent to which we're influenced by our social and professional environment and what we do and what's expected of us and the values of that. And then the big kind of thing about our national culture, its religion, its priorities, its values, and all those things. And all of these have an effect on us as we are in the process of sending and receiving messages. And for us it's particularly important to be aware of the effect of these on us as senders of messages.
And as receivers. And if you just want to add a touch of complication to that, and we're not going to have time to do it, but just to mention it, if you add that communication between person A and person B is people coming from different cultures in different countries, it's even much more complicated. It's complicated enough within our own families, our own communities, our own nations. Imagine that between two very different countries and cultures. Okay, so but we're going to leave it like that. Next time we have time for a cross-cultural communication training.
Next subject, and this is
our favorite.
Our favorite, and I think because if you get the hang of this, I don't think you need to go on a communications training course at all. So, this is not meant to be a test in English language, but I want to ask you, can any of you give us what you would, a definition of empathy? I'll say now, don't confuse it with sympathy. We'll talk about that, but anyone know about empathy?
Maybe an illustration. To say to stand in somebody's shoes and feel the way the person feels.
That's very close.
Like we did for the introduction of our friends. Just stand in the shoes.
Stand in somebody's shoes and feel like they do. Okay, that's not bad at all. Very close. Yes, Dr. Hassan, okay. Anyone else?
Dr. Hassan?
Body language is not?
No, not really. No, we'll come to that.
I think empathy is the positive feeling which we make forward someone who suffers.
No, that's sympathy. And that's the thing that is completely different. It's very important quality, but not empathy. Okay, we'll take up, you're so close. Oh yes, okay, please. Yes.
Is to really establish connection with who you're talking to and to really care about what is also important to the other side.
That's a very important part of it. Good. You're very close. Let me give you a definition, and you can see how close you all are. I'm sorry we're standing in front of you like this. It's tedious. I hope I'm moving enough for you to... Yes. Okay, so empathy is the ability to think and feel what it is like to be another person.
So you can be wearing his shoes and still be you. So it's wearing his shoes or her shoes and being that person.
Yes, people often say putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. No. It's understanding what it's like for them to be in their shoes. Not you to be in their shoes.
And as somebody once told me, it's understanding what is it to be them in their shoes and walking with those shoes.
Yes, yes, that's lovely. Now, do you begin to see why this is such a central skill and ability for effective communication? Some nodding head. No, all right. We've got. She was modestly saying she's been speaking too much. She's right, but she's so intelligent and charming and interesting. We have to.
Go on.
We have to.
He is a charmer. He is a charmer.
We'll give you a chance, but
I think it's fundamental because then you have the same code.
Codes. The same code.
Okay. You may not have the same code, but you will be absolutely clear about the code the other person is using. Yes, it may not mean you have the same one, but you're right.
Very similar.
You can find.
There's
connect.
empathy. Exactly.
You can connect to their code.
Do you want to add something to that? Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I think empathy is important in all communication, especially in health communication, because health messages are often they come across as paternalistic and authoritarian. And they are like top-down. So I believe that empathy makes a good, in health communication, makes a good communicator. I mean, it's crucial because most messages, people don't dig anymore messages that are top-down, paternalistic, I know better. So I think it's crucial for health communication.
And it goes back to the point you made earlier, that empathy allows you to identify the needs and wishes and priorities of other people in their terms.
Anybody else?
think in other words, we can say it is human technology.
Sorry?
It's a human technology.
Human technology.
Human technology.
So everything will be, automatically to be understood, To understand, to each other.
So that's our that's our definition. Here's the definition of sympathy, just so that we keep it separate. Sympathy is more or less what you said, is the compassionate, supportive feeling for the experiences or misfortunes of others. So somebody's had a bad time, you say, I'm really sorry to hear about this. Is there some way I can help you? That kind of stuff. But it's still it's two separate people having an interchange about an issue. Empathy is the question of understanding what it is like for that person to have had this experience. And when people say, I know just how you feel,
they don't.
They don't. And it can be a profoundly offensive and irritating thing for people to say, because nobody knows exactly how I feel ever. Yes? So we need to be very careful about that and to imagine that we can really feel. We can have sympathetic feelings, we can have a degree of empathy, and empathy takes us a few steps on the path towards an intimate inside understanding of other people. Never all the way, but it takes us some of the way. So, yes?
Could it be possible for me to develop empathy for another person because I have suffered the same thing before?
Yes.
Yes, that's a very good comment. Exactly. The more, people say that the more you have experienced the world, the more you have been exposed to things, the more you can find within yourself feelings and emotions that somehow connect closer to the other person.
Yes.
If you have lived all your life in a bubble where everything goes well, sometimes it's difficult to understand human suffering or human needs. But if you have experienced it or seen it or be part of it, then it is easier. Also, there are cultures that are more empathic than others, and that has to do with the characteristics of the cultures. Cultures that are more individualistic, where the distance is bigger, are normally less empathic, because empathy is a behavior that is not encouraged. Cultures where people like to be closer together tend to be more empathic, but it's not always true as well. But it's just to give you an idea.
This is very important, and for example, it is the case of if you're a parent, being a mother is a profound and important and difficult experience, and there are mothers all over the world, and there will be some degree of common feeling and common experience, but there will also be enormous amounts of difference. So the fact that we've had the same experience should never make us believe that we actually understand how other people feel, but it's a point of connection and a very important point too.
And when you do communications in different environments, something that communicators try to do, especially when we work in the field in emergency situations and crisis, is to try to find that point of connection, that small shared experience, something that you are going through that reminds me of something I went through. So I can hold on to that red thread and get to you. Even if I'm never going to be able to understand exactly what you're going through, I'm making a connection, I'm making an effort to connect.
Okay, and a very quick answer to you, can you learn, slightly different from the question you asked, but the one you made me think about, can you learn to be empathetic? Yes, you can. You can develop your capacity for empathy by observation, by attentive, active listening, by research, by sharing experience with other people, by going and living in communities, and finding out what the true experiences of people there are. But especially by listening. There is no more powerful way of beginning to understand how the internal life of other people than listening quietly and attentively and empathetically in order to get a genuine impression of how other people's lives are. The last thing I'm going to say about empathy is that empathy is not just some kind of wonderful romantic indulgence. The purpose of empathy is to lead to effective, accurate action. And this applies to you with your children when they're naughty. That on the whole, that unless we understand why a child is being disruptive or difficult or is lying or stealing, unless we have some empathetic understanding of what is going on inside that child. It'll be very difficult for us to manage it or control it or have some influence on it. Not always the case. Sometimes you just say, don't do that, stop it. You know, you have to, sometimes. But ultimately, that is, really, she said.
She's Latina. It's not illegal in Latin America.
but I can see your heads nodding.
Therapeutic.
Unless you understand the pain of the child, you can't really ever help the child get through whatever the problem is. I mean, I think I see some heads nodding about that. And that's an act of parental empathy. So it's not just about, healthcare communication and so on. This is about every relationship we have and the extent to which we can extend our understanding and our usefulness to others. I mean, that's the other thing. And so empathy is a path to being more supportive, more affectionate, more effectively helpful to other people. Okay, so, yes. Yes, Nana.
Yes, I think as he went on, my question has been answered. I was going to ask if nurses were empathic or sympathetic, but then...
If
nurses.
Nurses. Well, they need to be both.
Yes, but as you went on, so you've answered it, so that's it.
And there are lots of other qualities which I'm not like compassion. You know, there are other things which are part of this constellation of good qualities relationship. But that's another story in another week. So, I don't know whether this is sympathy or empathy, but one of the point...
Or both.
Or both. The point I want to make is there is lots of evidence that babies are born empathetic. Babies seem to have a great capacity to respond accurately to the distress of others, particularly, but also to the joy and the pleasure of others. And it's my feeling, and you may or may not agree with me, that as we get older, our capacity for empathy is eroded. It gets reduced. Yes?
For some people.
Yes. Yes, she's a perfect person, you understand. But I think the processes of growing up, of adulthood, do have that effect, because in some respects, empathy is a great burden to bear. If you really feel the pain of others in a genuine kind of way, and you see how much suffering there is around you and so on, life would become fairly intolerable. And schizophrenia is one of the kind of reactions to intolerable amount of pain of other people. But I think that it's true that bureaucracies and political institutions, and I think regulatory authorities, quite honestly, are the kinds of institutions which damage empathy, because genuinely paying attention to the feelings and the health needs of the population as a whole is very frightening. And bureaucrats don't like being frightened, they retreat.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be aware of how precious empathy is and to try and bring it to bear on our work.
Someone was sharing yesterday a situation in their country, was it Haiti? About use of medicines, self-medication, and how common. I think Paulina was always saying that it's also very common in El Salvador, and I can speak from Peru. It's also used to be very, very common, self-medication, and how scary was just the idea of thinking how to deal with that problem. And that has to do with what we're saying, is how do we understand why people self-medicate? And when we understand that, we might see some really ugly things that we have to deal with in order to really come with the message that will change that behavior.
Okay, I'm now going to behave in a very authoritarian and traditional fashion and say I'm not going to talk to you for about 15 minutes while I try and cover a lot of important things that I'd like just to lodge in your brain. So will you forgive me if I abandon talking with you for a short while and simply go through stuff which you can think about and ask questions about, but I'd like to cover the ground so that by the end of the session we've not left anything out. I'm going to leave this. This is some videos you might like to watch. Relevance of empathy, multiple purposes of communication, the immense range of things that we do when we're communicating, seducing people, informing people, manipulating people, all kinds of stuff.
Inspiring.
Inspiring.
Leading.
Leading, yes, like you, my dear, like you. But Yes, 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 yes. How?
He says manipulating, I say leading.
Mother figure.
3 boys, yes, absolutely,
yes,
indeed.
40 years younger than me.
As well.
Our professional purposes, I want to remind you just how many different kinds of communication we are engaged in, and that they do all require different kinds of skills and priorities and analysis. And I suppose if I was to choose any one of them, it would be the motivation and inspire one, which I think is the one we're least good at in science and bureaucracy, and we need to think about. But that's a whole incredible challenge of stuff. You can see that. You can't just sit down and do it, and you can't just get some clerk to sit down and do it. Okay, our audiences. We've talked about the perfect coding of messages in order that the recipient shares the code or does share the code. And every time you think of an audience, whoever it is, a politician, a patient, a doctor, a nurse, whoever it is, we have to think specifically about that audience segment, that group, that particular group, and what is the code, the method, the channel that we need to use for that particular group. And that we would call targeting. Commercial companies are superbly competent at targeting their messages. Like the one we saw earlier about the segment, the 15 to 19 female segment who drink alcohol. That's a specific identified segment. And every time we're going to send out a message, we have to think about who are the people in that segment, in our segment, what are they like, what are the precise methods we can use for reaching them. And this, again, another whole 2 or 3 days of activity on market segmentation. You may think that doctors are an audience. No, they're not. Amongst doctors, what are there? Pediatricians, surgeons, people who've been in the profession for 40 years, people who've been in it for 5 years, committed ones, people who are after the money. Oh, goodness me, how many? So you can't just say, well, now we're going to send something to doctors and imagine that a single message is going to reach the entire population of doctors. There may be occasions when you have to send a single message to all doctors, but you have to compose the message in the light of the fact that you're addressing maybe 30 different kinds of doctors.
And those are the kind of messages, the ones that go to global audiences, so broader audiences, that are the hardest to put together, to craft. Because, it will be fantastic to be able to send a letter to each doctor we know, but on practical terms, that's not possible. So when we do that, when we communicate, when we send mass messages, we need to spend a lot of time thinking what's the key message, how are we going to communicate this, and what do we want people to remember after they read the letter. So being very specific and very targeted is key.
And we have to think of the impact of sending a dear healthcare professional letter about pediatric drugs being received by a surgeon or a geriatric specialist. They'll look at this and think, oh. And what will that do to their feeling about the credibility of your communications and what they think about the next one you send? Those sorts of things have cumulative negative effects. So audience segmentation for every message you ever think about, age, sex, gender, culture, profession, all the rest of it. You need to think about that all the time. Methods and channels, how we would love to spend time talking to you about all these things, but how many different and exciting opportunities there are in the modern world, not the default of the printed word. That's the thing really you have to take home message. What can we use other than the printed word? Because the printed word on the whole really won't have much effect. And most drug safety information currently, most of it, not all, but most of it is printed word, horrible printed word on tiny bits of paper in very small fonts and completely unacceptable. So, a reminder here about the methods channels as
Paula.
Paula, oh yes, Paula, yes, please continue.
Just to reinforce what Bruce has been saying, when we look at this sketch of methods, it's not that the red ones are bad. Those are the hardest to get correct. That's what we're trying to explain with this. So Undressed documents, unaddressed documents, written address documents, the email, the bank email, all that works if it's done properly, but those are the hardest to do properly. Face-to-face communication can be challenging, but it usually goes well if you plan it. No? So that's what we were trying to explain with this.
Yes. So the lower you are down on that list of methods of communication, the more you have to think about and the more skilled it has to be in terms of its potential effectiveness. And the further you get from face-to-face, the more difficult it gets. And not to say you can never do it, but my God, it's a challenge the further down that line you get. Okay, so, and just to remind you, billions of people are active on social media the entire time. How much drug safety information is on social media? Not a lot, eh? Not a lot. And how much should there be? Lots, because it would reach millions of people. And we just have to bear that in mind too. And be brave. Regulators will probably think, oh, social media, trivial social nonsense, I don't want anything to do with that. We'll have a very old-fashioned, traditional, reluctant, anxious view of media as jumping into a great ocean of danger. But we have to move into this world and understand where it is relevant to our audience.
How many of you have a Twitter account?
Twitter account.
Facebook?
Oh, yes, you see.
Okay. How many of you check your social media accounts more than once a day? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
How many of you? No, I won't. How many of you have checked your social media accounts during sessions on this course? Okay, but doesn't that tell us something about priorities? People are driven by this, so we have to do it, don't we? We have to take it into account. So. No, I'm not going to go through the obstacles. Yes, obstacles. Right. What are the key points? I'm not going to do that now either. I wanted to have a conversation, but there isn't time. So let's get on to the very end. Oh, I've got my key points. All right? I'll give you my key points. Effective communication is complex and challenging. Yes, you've got that? Yes? Empathy is the key to understanding effective action in all communications. Got that? Good. Every audience is different and requires targeted, tailored messages. Got it? Good. There are multiple obstacles and pitfalls in all communication that must be recognized and managed. Yes? Okay. And do you have a different view of communication from what you had 75 minutes ago? Do you feel different about it now? Will you do it differently? Do you feel that really? Okay, at the end of the session, if we have time, we want to ask you, how will you do it differently? Okay, but do think about it, please, very important. So, rush through this, more stuff. This is getting slightly more nitty-gritty, if you like, down to the basic. Do you want to just have a quick introduction to STAR?
Okay, sir. Of course, just a very quick introduction to the STAR. We like to refer to the STAR model when we craft our communications because it helps us be focused on what we're trying to say. So it's a very simple process. You analyze a purpose. You consider that. So why are you communicating? What do you want to achieve? Why are you printing a brochure? Why are you doing a press release? Why are you putting a web story? Why are you crafting this poster? What is the purpose of your communications? Oh. Where is my STAR gone?
I'm sorry. I thought I was just backing you up.
Oh, okay, right. Consider the audience. Who are we talking to? As Bruce was saying, it's not the same talking to a geriatric doctor or a pediatric doctor. So we have to differentiate. It's not the same talking to people who have understanding of health or people who maybe believe more in traditional practices and not really trust conventional medicine. So we have to shape our message accordingly as well. How do we build the communications? How do we develop this structure? How do we put it together? How do we design it? You remember the poster about genital herpes. How do we design the communication? That's an image that is going to stay with you. It's strong, it's powerful, it's being very well designed. And execute with confidence is just about believing in what you're doing and what you're saying. We're standing here and we probably believe everything we have said, but that doesn't mean we know anything, right? We just do it very well. We just do it very well.
Yeah, quite, yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for that intelligent introduction. Purpose. Yes, what is your key message? At the point at which you start to communicate, do you really know what the key purpose of your message is? Is it giving information? Is it changing behavior? Is it asking for a response? What is the key message? Are you clear about that from the beginning? And if you're clear about it, put it at the top. And for email subject boxes too, make clear in the email subject box what the purpose of this email is, so that if people see it, they will not avoid it. You know, people with 100 emails in their boxes every day need some stimulation to open your particular one and take it easy. So think about this. What is the key impression, the key first impression I want to make with this message, wherever it is, email or anywhere else? And a poor headline will render your article invisible. Yes, well, we'll come back to that. Consider the audience. Now, we've talked a lot about this, and I think we can probably leave this. But think of the population, you know, of doctors or of nurses or of children or of your country. This mass, huge, huge mass of people. But what are the characteristics of this tiny, special group that you want to reach? And always separate it out from the notion of mass communication, wherever you can.
It's asking yourself who they are, what are their values, what do they care about, why will they listen to you?
And just to remind you that all around us in the world, there are expert communicators doing stuff all the time on television, on radio, newspapers, magazines, all over the place. This is just newspapers as an example, because visually they're very helpful. Although newspapers, of course, are in their printed form are on the decline. But the structure and design of newspapers is a very fine example for us. They sell newspapers by having key messages on the front page which catch our attention and make us spend our money. And the other extraordinary thing, and this is something I very rarely see in scientific, they have all sorts of other stuff on the front page which, if the main message doesn't grasp the audience, some of the other ones might. And you don't have to have the whole of the message on the front page, but you have to have the hook, the thing that will attract somebody on the front page, and then they'll open the paper and find the rest of it. But the design, presentation, and psychology of newspaper production is something we can always learn from and be inspired by, in my case, certainly. Build the structure. So this is something we'll spend a moment or two on. What is the structure of my communication? Formulate your message clearly. Make sure it stands out. Make the benefits clear. And if you want people to respond to a message, they need to know what the message is instantly, and then they need to know why they should read it. Is there any reason for reading it or not? And finally, repeat it. There's a fear amongst terribly serious people about repeating things. People will say to you, well, it's in the first paragraph. Why are you repeating it? Well, why are you repeating it? Because if you don't repeat it, people won't hear it. First time, almost 90% of messages missed. Second time, okay, a bit more penetration. Third time, might actually lodge. Fourth time, might have some effect. And this is true of public health campaigns. Safe sex, drink driving, smoking, campaigns which have had to go on for years, repeating the same message to have an ultimate effect on changing behavior. And if we want to do that, we have to be committed to communications strategies of that scale.
Exactly, over a long period of time. Yeah. And also, when we say repeat, it doesn't mean that you have to repeat things with the same words all the time. We can repeat by using visual messages, audio, color. I mean, there are many, many ways of just repeat a message in different formats.
And about structure, I really want you to take this very seriously too, because it's a general failing in the academic world and in science and in bureaucracy, is that the structure, the physical structure of communications often does not underpin and promote the message. WHO documents are particularly particularly terrible in this. You know, you have pages and pages and pages of introductory stuff.
Sorry, Daisuko. Sorry. No offense.
Oh, what's that?
Daisuko is.
Well, you can take this back to Geneva and tell them, because I wish they'd change their behaviour. Pages and pages and pages of introductory stuff before you get to the point. And that's true with all kinds of stuff, that people seem to think the background, the history, is what matters. And of course it's not. What matters is the message. That must be at the top. If you assume that of any piece of printed or written or website material, most people will read 10% of it, then you have to get your message in the first 10%. And that's true. You see that in newspapers, you see that in great communicators, you see it on the television, you hear it on the radio, that the people who effectively communicate with you get their essential message over to you in very short time. If you have lots of references and detail and arguments and things to say, then you put them much further down, or you put them in appendixes. You keep the message clean. Keep all the crap somewhere else. And those who want it, and there are people who want all the kind of third, fourth level detail, they can find it. Make sure they can find it. But most people don't want that level of detail. Example, a typical kind of academic page with no structure. You see? No structure. There's nothing, no headline, no box, no quotation, no call-out, no subheads, no bold, no pictures, nothing. It does not invite reading. And most of our communications are to audiences who are not already motivated. If you're already highly motivated, you'll read anything that is of interest and relevance.
Exactly.
But most audiences are not motivated, so our communications have to do that. And here we are. Look, this is core drug safety communication to patients, okay? Absolutely the heart of regulatory efforts to protect patients.
And if you are over 35 and wear glasses, you cannot read that. It's impossible.
And English isn't your first language, all the rest of it. I think this is a disgrace. And people who produce this should have their bottoms spanked for a week. Really, is this what we do? Is this what we do to protect patients from harm? And in light of everything we've said, can you see the extent of the failure of this kind of communication? Hopeless. And for doctors too. Just the same. They're no different from the rest of the world. They will read a bit. They will not and you see the size of this? Those are coins. They're nearly as big as a 5-crown bloody coin. So, this, please, think about this. We're moving on rather. Yes, do you want to say something?
Just want to say something very quickly.
Yes.
Same size of format. I'm sorry I don't have a picture, but how many of you have an iPhone? How many of you have an iPhone? Okay, you do. The iPhones, don't they come with a little graphic that tells you how to use the iPhone instead of so many words? Don't they have those little figures that tell you what to do? Well, same size of paper, but much more effective, because you know how to turn on your iPhone and you know how to set it up without 1,000 words giving you the instructions to do it. So it's not about the size of paper, it's about the content.
Yes, of course. Yes,
yes,
quickly.
Paulina.
But I think that with all respect, that the pharmaceutical industry, they are geniuses for doing marketing.
Yes.
If they do this kind of work, it's because they are not interested. They don't care if it's better if the patient does not read this information.
Okay.
So I think it's done with that purpose.
Okay. But these are under the authority of the regulator. The regulator specifies what they have to do.
Exactly. It's not,
but not the
SPC.
Not the characteristics, not the static part, not the colors. Okay. They send it. They send this information.
Yes, and the regulators should do something positive with it.
So the regulators could go back to the pharma company and say, okay, now give me this in a way that people understand it. But that's up to also.
Or, but we can say it's unattractive.
It will
modify
not
it.
Do it. Yes, quite. Okay.
Recommend better.
Thank you for raising the point.
It's
a very important point, and it's very important for you to identify the point at which decisions about these things are made and where they can be influenced and changed. Okay, we've got. It's nearly tea time. You'll all be wanting cake and tea. We're going to move
it's
on
called
fast.
Fika.
Fika.
In Swedish.
In
so you know,
Swedish.
very important word, right,
yes.
Annette? Fika.
Well, fika.
And you have to pronounce it right, otherwise you say other things, huh? By the way. Pronounce it properly, please, because otherwise you say something that is not drinkable.
We're nearly done. I want to draw your attention to one thing. This is another indication of the many...
Nice.
Of the many... Are we not interesting enough? Should we go?
It's fika time.
Fika time. Fika time. Bloody hell. Well, fika, frankly. Now, this is one thing which, an indication of the extraordinary number of disciplines which communicators need to be able to draw on. And I'm going to talk about this strange notion of white space. And this is a fundamental graphic design concept which relates to the amount of empty space there is on a page. And you will find, if you look critically at magazines, at buildings, at paintings, all kinds of things, that many of the most beautiful things in many different cultures, not exclusively, but always have lots of empty space associated with something that is beautiful. Now, I'll just give you very simple examples here of 3 pages. You have a page which is full, which has no white space, and then you have an advertisement which has lots of white space, and you have a simple piece of text where almost a third of the space is empty. And you can see, can't you, that the stuff on the left is horrible, impenetrable, unpleasant, unaesthetic, unattractive, and typical of drug safety communications. And the stuff in the middle is typical of people who are interested in influencing their audiences. Are we interested in influencing our audiences? Yes. Are we going to use white space? Yes, we are. Huh? Okay.
So when you hire a communications professional, I always say, don't forget the white space.
Yes.
That's what you have to say, yes.
Okay, so that's just, graphic design is a huge and important discipline which we need to be relating with and collaborating with. You know, we can't do it because we have other specialisms. Okay, so...
Sorry, the third picture?
I'm sorry?
Comparing the 3 and the last one, the motivation comparing to the second one.
The top one is just an ordinary kind of magazine page, but it... Oh, sorry. No, I wasn't emphasizing the colorful. Oh, that's a good point. No, I didn't think about this. I was so focused on white space, I didn't think about color at all. So the one on the right could have color in it as well. But the point is that the text is set in an area of white space, and it breathes, which this stuff on the doesn't. It's the other on the left suffocates.
The bottom line is design matters.
Yes.
When you communicate your messages, design is key. Whatever design appeals to your target audience, because this might not be appealing for all your audiences. So it has to be a design that appeals to your audiences. That's what you need to remember.
I think we should stop. It's fika time, and if I should,
yeah. if I agree.
If I don't let you have fika, I shall probably be fikaed for the rest of the day. So we have to come back in half an hour, and you've got more of us.
I told you there are 2 meanings for the world.
What? Yes,
2 meanings, different pronunciation.
Unfortunately, I have to tell you, you've got another session with both of us afterwards.
My Swedish colleagues are looking at me like saying, Paula, Paula, Paula.
Yes. So 30 minutes break, okay? Yeah. Come back refreshed, and I think we might need to get some air moving around this room. Thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you.